Battle Royal by Ralph Ellison is a troubling story featuring one of literature's most sort of uh, easy to feel sorry for, but also most frustrating characters. The story was written in 1947, and it is actually eventually was made the lead chapter in the incredibly famous book, The Invisible Man, that is not about invisibility, but is in fact about the plight of African Americans trying to come of age in a situation that does not favor them. Book Week actually referred to The Invisible Man as the most significant work of fiction written by an American between 1945 and 1965. And I think that sort of assessment would still hold true today. This particular story, though, sets up our main character, who doesn't have a name other than just the narrator of Battle Royal / Invisible Man. This story is stunning for the types of things that happen in it. We get a huge blindfolded fight between a whole bunch of different boys. We get people rolling around on an electric carpet. We have a naked woman parading around. We have somebody giving a speech while blood is pouring out of their mouth. We get the grandfather's curse, haunting him in his dreams. There's a scholarship involved, so it's like basically this story has a little bit of everything, and that sort of those fantabulous plot points, piled on top of the profound social commentary that Ellison is offering, make this a particularly influential work and emblematic of what exactly American literature is. So one of the big sort of themes here is, how is an African American, or really any sort of minority group, supposed to conduct itself if it does indeed hope to get ahead and have a good life? This is an issue that Ellison considered very deeply, because basically there are a few choices. Either you can obey and follow the rules, and hope to get ahead that way. But then, of course, you're obeying and you're following the rules, even though the rules are sort of stacked against you. So that sort of seems like a problem, and that is the problem our narrator gets himself into. Alternatively, you fight against it. You battle against the rules, but then that's obviously going to hurt you even more in the short term and perhaps in the long term. You may maintain your dignity, but you're going to lose your opportunities. So that sort of paradoxical, complicated situation is what our narrator finds himself in. The story, of course, begins with the deathbed, exaltations of the grandfather, in which, even though he was a very meek and agreeable man, said that he had been a traitor and that he'd been fighting his whole life. What on earth this means is something that provides complication for the narrator of the story, and it also provides complication for readers, because they don't really know what to make of it either. On one hand, he could have been a traitor, or could have fought via his being meek, and that was how he tried to get ahead. Or he could be a traitor against his own race by being too obedient. It's something very sort of mystifying, and makes it complicated to know how to deal with. Another thing here with our narrator, we are dealing with a naive individual. He's very smart, he's at the top of his class, but he also, of course, has gotten himself into this sort of situation here where he has to go give a speech for all the, important, quote-unquote, important men of the town, but then he finds himself in a battle royal. It's sort of an incredibly sort of stupid situation to end up in, and he sort of ends up getting his butt kicked in the process. So there are a number of questions that I think are important to ask of yourself when you're reading this. On one hand, because I think it's easy to judge him as a character, but I think we do have to ask, what would you do in his situation? You're given an opportunity to give a talk for, all these people who can improve your life, but it might mean sacrificing some of your dignity. Do you fight against that, or do you go along with it? Why does he try to impress these men at all? And then, of course, there's the complicated issue of the white girl who's nude, what she represents. In some ways, she represents everything that these African American boys are not able to have, and that's one reason that seeing her terrifies them so much. But then there's also the social commentary that in many ways she's sort of like them, because she's being pushed around and abused by these horrible white people, just like these young men are. So this sort of power structures are definitely being called into question here, and it's all very problematic. Another big problematic element is when our narrator ends up in the fight with Tatlock after everybody else has already left, and he tries to get Tatlock to end up throwing the fight, even if he pays him. Tatlock won't do it because he's upholding some personal sense of honor. Ellison in one way is stating that, one of the major problems with being any sort of subjugated individual or somebody who's disadvantaged, whether it be financially or you're in some sort of other situation that's going to mean that you're not in power, that oftentimes the people who are not in power spend as much time fighting with each other and hurting each other as they should be working together to sort of overthrow the power structure that's made their situation tense in the first place. So in some ways, that's a potential thing that Tatlock represents. Of course, our narrator is frustrating. You'd think that he would, try to get out of this, or that at least he wouldn't want to, jump on an electrified carpet for a few coins. But he does anyway. And it all leads to the situation in which at the end he does have to give his big speech. In this big speech, he accidentally says the wrong thing, and that gets everybody really angry because, of course, being a good, silent, agreeable type, he should have said social responsibility, but instead he slipped up and said social equality. This mistake of his is ironic because in many ways it's probably what he should have actually said and what would have been the more honorable thing to say, but of course it's not what he says. It's not what he meant to say, rather. So social equality, of course, would imply that African Americans and Caucasians should have equal rights, when of course for the audience that he's dealing with, that's not something that's even going to be on the table. These people want him to know his place. That would be social responsibility. So that's why it's such a big deal when he speaks out against it. Ultimately, as you know, in the end, he's awarded with a scholarship so that he can go to the Negro college. This is sort of a problematic thing as well because it's an example of our narrator getting ahead, and actually having good things happen. But in a sense, going to this particular type of college may be in fact perpetuating the exact same sort of problem that these white people potentially are trying to get him to perpetuate so that they can maintain their control. So he's in a very problematic situation where he doesn't necessarily know how to act, but he's so naive that he just acts however he feels he needs to react in the moment. It's only at the end of the story when we get this situation with the dream of the grandfather in which he has to continually open up thing after thing after thing and is told to, that he needs to keep running, that only that laughter of his grandfather ringing in his ears sort of wakes him up to the problem of his situation in which he doesn't really know what is going to be the best thing to do. So, Battle Royal by Ralph Ellison, an incredibly profound and complicated story, has all sorts of action, but a big thing you want to consider in regards to this story is what exactly could our narrator have done to get himself out of this situation, and what is this story saying about the overall plight of people who are in a disadvantageous situation and what necessarily their choices are.